v.I. Lenin. Written, the theses January 7, 1918, Thesis 22 on January 21, Introduction February 11, 1918. First published, without Thesis 22 in Pravda No. 34, February 24, 1918. Source, Lenin's Collected Works, Progress Publishers, Moscow, Volume 26, 1972, pages 442-450. Translated, Yuri Stobnikov and George Hanna, edited by George Hanna. Transcription in HTML markup, Charles Farrell and David Walters. Online version, Lenin Internet Archive. November, 2000. It might be argued that this is no time to deal with history. Certainly, this kind of assertion would be permissible if a particular question from the past were not inseparably and directly connected in practice with the present. The question of the unfortunate peace, the exceptionally harsh peace is, however, such a burning question that it calls for elucidation. I am therefore publishing my theses on this subject that were read at a meeting of about 60 of the leading Petrograd Party functionaries on January 8, 1918. Here are these theses. January 7, 1918. Theses on the question of the immediate conclusion of a separate and annexationist peace. 1. The position of the Russian Revolution at the present moment is such that nearly all the workers and the vast majority of the peasants undoubtedly side with Soviet power and the socialist revolution which it has started. To that extent, the socialist revolution in Russia is assured. 2. At the same time, the civil war, provoked by the frantic resistance of the wealthy classes, who realize full well that they are faced with the last and decisive fight for the preservation of private ownership of the land and means of production, has not yet reached its climax. The victory of Soviet power in this war is assured, but some time must inevitably elapse. No little exertion of effort will inevitably be required. A certain period of acute economic dislocation and chaos, which accompany all wars, and civil war in particular, is inevitable, before the resistance of the bourgeoisie is crushed. 3. Furthermore, this resistance, in its less active and non-military forms, sabotage, the hire of declassed elements and agents of the bourgeoisie, who worm their way into the ranks of the socialists in order to ruin their cause, and so on and so forth, has proved so stubborn and capable of assuming such diversified forms, that the fight against it will inevitably require some more time, and, in its main forms, is hardly likely to end until several months have passed, and unless this passive and covert resistance of the bourgeoisie and its supporters is definitely crushed, the socialist revolution cannot succeed. 4. Lastly, the organizational problems of the socialist transformation of Russia are so immense and difficult that their solution, in view of the numerous petty bourgeois fellow travelers of the socialist proletariat, and of the latter's low cultural level, will also require a fairly long time. 5. All these circumstances taken together are such as to make it perfectly clear that for the success of socialism in Russia a certain amount of time, several months at least, will be necessary, during which the hands of the socialist government must be absolutely free to achieve victory over the bourgeoisie first in our own country and to launch far-reaching mass organizational work on a wide scale. 6. The position of the socialist revolution in Russia must form the basis of any definition of the international tasks of our Soviet power. For the international situation in the fourth year of the war is such that it is quite impossible to predict the probable moment of outbreak of revolution and overthrow of any of the European imperialist governments, including the German. That the socialist revolution in Europe must come, and will come, is beyond doubt. All our hopes for the final victory of socialism are founded on this certainty and on this scientific prognosis. Our propaganda activities in general, and the organization of fraternization in particular, must be intensified and extended. It would be a mistake, however, to base the tactics of the Russian socialist government on attempts to determine whether or not the European, and especially the German, socialist revolution will take place in the next 6 months, or some such brief period. Inasmuch as it is quite impossible to determine this, all such attempts, objectively speaking, would be nothing but a blind gamble. 7. The peace negotiations in Brest-Litovsk have by now, January 7, 1918, made it perfectly clear that the war party has undoubtedly gained the upper hand in the German government, which has the other governments of the Quadruple Alliance at its beck and call, and has virtually already presented Russia with an ultimatum, and it is to be expected, most certainly to be expected, that any day now it will be presented formally. The ultimatum is as follows: either the continuation of the war, or a peace with annexations, i.e., Peace on condition that we surrender all the territory we have occupied, while the Germans retain all the territory they have occupied and impose upon us an indemnity, outwardly disguised as payment for the maintenance of prisoners, an indemnity of about 3,000 million rubles, payable over a number of years. 8. The socialist government of Russia is faced with the question, a question whose solution brooks no delay, of whether to accept this peace with annexations now, or to immediately wage a revolutionary war. In fact, no middle course is possible. No further postponement can now be achieved, for we have already done everything possible and impossible to deliberately protract the negotiations. 9. On examining the arguments in favor of an immediate revolutionary war, the first argument we encounter is that a separate peace at this juncture would, objectively speaking, be in agreement with the German imperialists, an imperialistic deal, and so forth, and that, consequently, such a peace would mean a complete break with the fundamental principles of proletarian internationalism. This argument, however, is obviously incorrect. Workers who lose a strike and sign terms for the resumption of work which are unfavorable to them and favorable to the capitalists, do not betray socialism. The only people who betray socialism are those who secure advantages for a section of the workers in exchange for profit to the capitalists. Only such agreements are impermissible in principle. He betrays socialism who calls the war with German imperialism a defensive and just war, but actually receives support from the Anglo-French imperialists, and conceals secret treaties concluded with them from the people. He does not in the least betray socialism who, without concealing anything from the people, and without concluding any secret treaties with the imperialists, agrees to sign terms of peace which are unfavorable to the weak nation and favorable to the imperialists of one group, if at that moment there is no strength to continue the war. 10. Another argument in favor of immediate war is that, by concluding peace, we objectively become agents of German imperialism, for we afford it the opportunity to release troops from our front, we surrender to it millions of prisoners of war, and so on. But this argument too is manifestly incorrect, for a revolutionary war at the present juncture would, objectively speaking, make us agents of Anglo-French imperialism, by providing it with forces which would promote its aims. The British bluntly offered our commander-in-chief, Krylenko, 100 rubles per month for every one of our soldiers provided we continued the war. Even if we did not take a single kopeck from the Anglo-French, we nevertheless would be helping them, objectively speaking, by diverting part of the German army. From that point of view, in neither case would we be entirely escaping some sort of imperialist bond, and it is obvious that it is impossible to escape it completely without overthrowing world imperialism. The correct conclusion from this is that the moment a socialist government triumphed in any one country, questions must be decided, not from the point of view of whether this or that imperialism is preferable, but exclusively from the point of view of the conditions which best make for the development and consolidation of the socialist revolution, which has already begun. In other words, the underlying principle of our tactics must not be, which of the two imperialisms it is more profitable to aid at this juncture, but rather, how the socialist revolution can be most firmly and reliably ensured the possibility of consolidating itself, or, at least, of maintaining itself in one country until it is joined by other countries. 11. It is said that the German social democratic opponents of the war have now become defeatists and are requesting us not to yield to German imperialism. But we recognize defeatism only in respect of one's own imperialist bourgeoisie, and we always discountenanced victory over an alien imperialism, victory attained in formal or actual alliance with a friendly imperialism, as a method impermissible in principle and generally wrong. This argument is therefore only a modification of the previous one. If the German left Social Democrats were proposing that we delay concluding a separate peace for a definite period, and guaranteed revolutionary action in Germany within this period, the question might assume a different aspect for us. Far from saying this, however, the German lefts formally declare, hold out as long as you can, but decide the question from the point of view of the state of affairs in the Russian Socialist Revolution, for we cannot promise you anything positive regarding the German Revolution. 12. It is said that in a number of party statements we actually promised a revolutionary war, and that by concluding a separate peace we would be going back on our word. That is not true. We said that in the era of imperialism, a socialist government had to prepare for and wage a revolutionary war. We said this in order to combat abstract pacifism and the theory that defense of the fatherland must be completely rejected in the era of imperialism, and, lastly, to combat the purely selfish instincts of a part of the soldiers. but we never gave any pledge to start a revolutionary war without considering whether it is possible to wage it at a given moment. Unquestionably, even at this juncture we must prepare for a revolutionary war. We are carrying out this promise, as we have, in general, carried out all our promises that could be carried out at once. We annulled the secret treaties, offered all peoples a fair peace, and several times did our best to drag out peace negotiations so as to give other peoples a chance to join us. But the question whether it is possible to carry on a revolutionary war now, immediately, must be decided exclusively from the point of view of whether material conditions permit it, and of the interests of the socialist revolution which has already begun. 13. Summing up the arguments in favor of an immediate revolutionary war, we have to conclude that such a policy might perhaps answer the human yearning for the beautiful, dramatic and striking, but that it would totally disregard the objective balance of class forces and material factors at the present stage of the socialist revolution now underway. 14. There can be no doubt that our army is absolutely in no condition at the present moment, and will not be for the next few weeks, and probably for the next few months, to beat back a German offensive successfully. Firstly, owing to the extreme fatigue and exhaustion of the majority of the soldiers, coupled with the incredible chaos in the matter of food supply, replacement of the overfatigued, etc. Secondly, owing to the utter unfitness of the horses and the consequent inevitable ruin of our artillery, and, thirdly, owing to the absolute impossibility of defending the coastline from Riga to Revel, which affords the enemy a very certain chance of seizing the rest of Livland, and then Espland, and of outflanking a large part of our forces, and finally, of capturing Petrograd. 15. Further, there is not the slightest doubt that the peasant majority of our army would at the present juncture unreservedly declare in favor of a peace with annexations, and not in favor of an immediate revolutionary war. The socialist reorganization of the army, the merging of the Red Guard detachments with it, and so on, have only just begun. With the army completely democratized, to carry on war in defiance of the wishes of the majority of the soldiers would be a reckless gamble, while to create a really staunch and ideologically stable socialist workers' and peasants' army will, at the very least, require months and months. 16. The poor peasants in Russia are capable of supporting the socialist revolution led by the working class, but they are not capable of agreeing to fight a serious revolutionary war immediately, at the present juncture. To ignore the objective balance of class forces on this issue would be a fatal error. 17. Consequently, the situation at present with regard to a revolutionary war is as follows. If the German Revolution were to break out in triumph in the coming 3 or 4 months, the tactics of an immediate revolutionary war might perhaps not ruin our socialist revolution. If, however, the German Revolution does not occur in the next few months, the course of events, if the war is continued, will inevitably be such that grave defeats will compel Russia to conclude an even more disadvantageous separate peace, a peace, moreover, which would be concluded, not by a socialist government, but by some other, for example, a bloc of the bourgeois Rada and Chernov's followers, or something similar. For the peasant army, which is exhausted to the limit by the war, will after the very first defeats, and very likely within a matter of weeks, and not of months, overthrow the socialist workers' government. 18. This being the state of affairs, it would be absolutely impermissible tactics to stake the fate of the socialist revolution, which has already begun in Russia, merely on the chance that the German Revolution may begin in the immediate future, within a matter of weeks. Such tactics would be a reckless gamble. We have no right to take such risks. 19. The German Revolution will by no means be made more difficult of accomplishment, as far as its objective premises are concerned, if we conclude a separate peace. Probably chauvinist intoxication will weaken it for a time, but Germany's position will remain extremely grave. The war with Britain and America will be a protracted one, and aggressive imperialism will be fully and completely exposed on both sides. A socialist Soviet republic in Russia will stand as a living example to the peoples of all countries, and the propaganda and revolutionizing effect of this example will be immense. There, the bourgeois system in a fully exposed predatory war between two groups of marauders. Here, peace in a socialist Soviet republic. 20. In concluding a separate peace, we free ourselves as much as is possible at the present moment from both hostile imperialist groups. We take advantage of their mutual enmity and warfare, which hamper concerted action on their part against us, and for a certain period have our hands free to advance and to consolidate the socialist revolution. The reorganization of Russia on the basis of the dictatorship of the proletariat, and the nationalization of the banks and large-scale industry, coupled with exchange of products in kind between the towns and the small peasant consumer societies, is quite feasible economically, provided we are assured a few months in which to work in peace. And such a reorganization will render socialism invincible both in Russia and all over the world, and at the same time will create a solid economic basis for a mighty workers' and peasants' Red Army. 21. A really revolutionary war at this juncture would be a war waged by a socialist republic against the bourgeois countries, with the aim, an aim clearly defined and fully approved by the socialist army, of overthrowing the bourgeoisie in other countries. However, we obviously cannot set ourselves this aim at the present moment. Objectively, we would be fighting now for the liberation of Poland, Livland and Courland, but no Marxist, without renouncing the principles of Marxism and of socialism generally, can deny that the interests of socialism are higher than the interests of the right of nations to self-determination. Our socialist republic has done all it could, and continues to do all it can to give effect to the right to self-determination of Finland, the Ukraine, etc. But if the concrete situation is such that the existence of the Socialist Republic is being imperiled at the present moment on account of the violation of the right to self-determination of several nations, Poland, Livland, Courland, etc., naturally the preservation of the Socialist Republic has the higher claim. Consequently, whoever says, we cannot sign a humiliating, atrocious, etc., peace, betray Poland, and so forth, does not realize that by concluding peace on the condition that Poland is liberated, he would only be strengthening German imperialism against Britain, Belgium, Serbia and other countries still further. Peace on the condition of the liberation of Poland, Livland and Courland would be a patriotic peace from the point of view of Russia, but would by no means cease to be a peace with the annexationists, with the German imperialists. January 21, 1918. The following should be added to the above theses. 22. The mass strikes in Austria and Germany, and, subsequently, the formation of the Soviets of Workers' Deputies in Berlin and Vienna, and, lastly, beginning from January 18, 20, armed clashes and street fighting in Berlin, all this should be regarded as evidence of the fact that the revolution in Germany has begun. This fact offers us the opportunity, for the time being, of further delaying and dragging out the peace negotiations. Footnotes. A discussion of the question of war and peace was held by the Central Committee on January 11, 1918, following a speech by Lenin, who was opposed by the left communists and Trotsky. Some of them, Bukharin, Uretsky, Lomov, Apakov, supported Trotsky's proposal for a neither war nor peace attitude. Stalin, Sergeyev, Artyom and Sokolnikov favored peace. The left communists did not expect the Revolutionary War Now slogan to go through. Only 2 voted for it, and so voted for Trotsky's proposal, which received 9 votes to 7 against. In the hope of overcoming the resistance to the conclusion of peace within the Central Committee and winning over the section of the masses which followed the advocates of a revolutionary war, Lenin motioned the proposal that the talks should be delayed in every possible way, and this was passed by 12 votes to 1, and Lenin,